Hi, everyone. My name is Alan. I'm a protocol engineer at Uniswap Labs.
Hi, I'm Brad. I'm a research scientist at Uniswap Labs.
And today we'll be talking about optimizing Dutch auctions on Arbitrum. When we think about swapping on-chain, we typically think about trading against AMMs. But using AMMs and on-chain liquidity isn't always the best for every single trade. This is because of reasons like liquidity fragmentation and MEV. We want to be able to expand the realm of accessible on-chain liquidity while also opening the door for off-chain liquidity. A pattern that's used to achieve this is using intents, where a swapper signs an intent to swap token A to token B, and they don't care where the token B comes from. They just want it to come in a reasonable amount of time and get a good price for it. So thinking from this perspective, it's a simple problem that swappers want two things: good pricing and fast execution. Today, there are systems that get us good pricing and fast execution, like RFQ systems, but they often run into problems around complexity and fairness. They're also relatively difficult to analyze and execute. So today, we'll be talking about a simple approach, which is using Dutch auctions on-chain. A Dutch auction is an auction where the price starts high, and it gets lower and lower until the price is taken. This is called a price decay. So the price starts high, and it decays lower and lower until market competition fills the order. If you set the price too high, then the auction will take a while to fill. But if you set the starting price too low, then you'll just get a bad price. So we're left with a simple question: how do we set this Dutch auction optimally? And the answer is time. Time is all you need.
So as Alan mentioned, when you hold an auction, it takes some time for your auction to get filled. We can call this wait time. We can actually design a system that depends on mainly this output metric, wait time, to give the user the best price possible. So in other words, we can avoid the problems of complexity, fairness, and difficulty to evaluate without compromising on execution quality for the user. So to test this idea, we made a simulation. And this simulation depends on market prices, AMM prices, takes into account price impact to create reference prices, and then we run multiple Dutch auctions across this price background. On your bottom left corner, you'll see two output metrics, fill rate and wait time. And we tell this algorithm to aim for a wait time of 4 seconds. On the bottom right-hand side, you'll see the parameters of the Dutch auction tuning to try and achieve this wait time of 4 seconds. And in particular, in the bottom right chart, the x-axis is a parameter that can give you an approximate value of how much price improvement you're getting. And this value is meaningful when it converges to roughly, in this case, 4 seconds. So what I've shown you is that, and one thing is that the maximum price improvement that I injected in the simulation was 25 basis points. And as you can see, it converges to this 25 basis points. So I've shown you that I can only look at one simple metric and give the user best price possible with the ability to evaluate what that price improvement is. So let me give you some intuition behind what's going on here. So the red dots here represent the auction prices changing with different parameterizations. Your auction gets filled when the market price goes above the auction price. When a user comes in to swap, for example, at block 10, we can check the AMM price, generate a reference price, and use that to parameterize on our auction. So what happens if you parameterize your auction too low? If you start off too low, you get filled instantly. This is bad because it means you could have gotten a better price. What happens if you parameterize the start of your auction too high? You get filled much later. This isn't necessarily bad, but it makes your auction harder to evaluate. So if you get filled within the first or second block, or first couple blocks, then that period tells you that you parameterize your auction just right, and you still give the user the best price possible. So using this strategy, we can compare it to other strategies of parameterizing Dutch auctions. You can think about using sex prices. If you use sex prices, then you run into the problem of fairness. You guarantee fairness, but you can't parameterize every token. If you use RFQ, you kind of compromise on fairness, but you can parameterize every token. In all cases, you compromise on ability to evaluate. Our strategy satisfies all these criteria. So this is just the beginning. We're testing this out on Arbitrum, but this can work on any Dutch blockchain-based Dutch auction. And we think this is a step towards testing out nonlinear auctions in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. So do we have any questions over here? Yep. Thank you. That's fine. A bit short.
All right, thanks. So what does Time Boost do to your design?
So in Time Boost, you pay extra to come in first, right?
Yes, but imagine, so ignore that factor, but there is one player who has this 200 millisecond advantage.
I think the user gets better price. I don't.
That user.
That user, yeah.
Thanks.
No, what's important is the filler. It's an open market on the Dutch auction, so it doesn't really matter. And yeah, I don't think I understand. It's an open, anyone can fill. So
yes, but one party has time advantage. Like,
so you're saying if the filler has time advantage?
Yeah, let's say filler or the other.
Yeah, so if the filler has first move in that block, then in that particular block where the price decays to where the true market price is, where they would want to fill, then yes, they would be able to snatch that before other people.
We have one question right here.
Hi, so if I understood correctly, you're running this auction for each token simultaneously or just one at a time?
So whenever a user makes an intent to make a trade, that trade itself is a single auction that's going to run on chain for people to fill.
But if there are multiple auctions running parallelly, there is a lot of arbitrage opportunity because the prices may not agree.
Each auction for each trade is unique, right? They have their own unique parameters. They have outputs that the users are expecting, so they are distinct.
So let's say if there is an exchange between USDC and ETH going on that's priced at 300, and there's somewhere else, the opposite trade is happening at 1/400, like there is a arbitrage opportunity across these two places if somebody can submit 2 bids and profit.
Yeah, so if the person who's filling that auction, there would be an expectation if they're behaving rationally that they must have sourced the liquidity somewhere else in order to fulfill that trade on chain.
I think I put in an assumption in the simulation that you're probably saying it's not necessarily the market price that determines the fill. And what determines the fill is if whoever's willing to give the best price, and that's all we care about. The best price we can capture for the user, whoever decides to fill it. So not necessarily at the market price.
We have one last question over here.
Hi. How do you account for the liquidity when you're doing the testing? Since if you only test with like a small amount in your trade and it gets filled quickly, but then when you adjust it and you want to swap more, then you're going to get hit by liquidity.
You're going to get hit. You mean
you're going to like the
price
will
impact?
change. Yeah, the price.
Yeah. So I think what I showed you is a simple version where the price impact is you take orders of roughly the same size and you run this algorithm. You can either choose to bucket by trade size and run this algorithm or have a smarter algorithm. I didn't really talk too much about how the algorithm was working, just the intuition behind it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Alan and Brad. Please give them a nice round of applause. And now we're going to have the last talk for the crypto economics track today. And so we're welcoming back Terence for his second talk of the day. And he's going to talk about inclusion list inevitable trade-offs. Please welcome back Terence.
Hello. Hi, I'm back. Thank you. And yeah, so this one is more, again, on inclusion list, and it's more on the engineering side that as someone that has been focusing on inclusion list over the last year, and I also started looking at fossil more and more, and this is where my perspective in terms of engineering challenge with regards to inclusion list. So today, where we are, right? So today we have Ethereum slot, and each slot is 12 seconds. And what are the constraints within the slot? So as a proposer, I want to propose a block. And I would hate to have my block gets reorged, and that's not nice. So I want to propose my block on the strongest head that's possible, right? And after I propose the block, everyone else on the network that's running a node will verify the block and compute what is the head. And as a tester, their job is to attest to the head of the block. So this is where the for choice follows if you use LMD Ghost. And then as an aggregator, as optional, you aggregate attestations. And then the proposer essentially follows the votes for the next slot, and then it builds on top of the head, right? And then because of timing game, you can see there is a phenomenon that today, the attested cutoff is at 4 seconds. So basically everything is pushed towards the 4-second mark. And that's kind of the equilibrium right now, that everything happens between 3 to 4 seconds. And then between 4 to 12 seconds of nothing typically happens unless you're the next slot proposer, you're listening transactions, and you're building block. So where does inclusion list fit into this picture? So here I'm speaking in terms of fossil. So fossil is a EIP 7805, I believe, but go search it if you don't know what fossil is. So fossil is probably the best inclusion list design that I have seen so far that is mostly bulletproof in my opinion. And then it has the same slot property. And then, so what fossil does essentially is that it essentially allows secondary runs of proposals that are allowed to send their local block, and then such that it constrains the next slot proposer essentially. So where does that leave us in the picture, right? So because of that, we have to essentially add this proposer in the middle of the 12 slots. That means that as a proposer for the inclusion list, I have to essentially verify the block beforehand such that I want to essentially propose the best inclusion list effort, right? And then as a constraint, the next slot builder or the proposer, I have to essentially pack the inclusion list into the block. And then if I miss inclusion list, then I may miss my block. And also as a tester, I want to make sure that the block satisfies the inclusion list. So there are 3 more constraints as a builder, as a proposer, as a tester, which I cover here. So where are some parameters that we can play in terms of trade-off? So for example, how big is the size of the size of an inclusion list, right? If the inclusion list size is so small that it may not be useful, but the inclusion list size is too big, then you open up network for DOS concern. What is the size of the inclusion list committee? Because we want committee size to be reasonable, but then if the size is too big, again, you open up network DOS concern. And then how much overlapping are there within the inclusion list? And then what is the satisfactory rule, right? So as a proposer for the next slot, as a tester, I'm verifying the block. Basically how much of the inclusion list the proposer has to satisfy for the block to be valid. So what are the concerns? So first concern, I think, is the increase of bandwidth and compute for node. Depends on how big your inclusion list size is. And then again, the second concern is that proposer, how much time do I have to build the block? And then as a tester, how much time do I have to verify the block? So here are some open questions for us to study if we're interested in this inclusion list space. How compatible it is with the future roadmap, such as Pierre does, such as EPBS. how does encryption disk work with account abstraction, and then like how can we add blob transactions into the encryption disk such that it doesn't open up those concerns, and then how can we better utilize local mempool for encryption disk? Maybe we can just essentially send the transaction hash instead of sending the full transactions. Finally, like, will there be an auto protocol market for encryption disk? And it's something that we need to study more. So yeah, if you're interested to contribute, definitely hit up Julian and then hit up me. And then yeah, definitely, I'm definitely very excited about this encryption disk design space. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we have time for a few Q&A. Please raise your hand if you have any question. Okay. No questions? Okay, seems, oh, there's a question here.
Yeah, super interesting. I had a question. So I don't know if you can answer this, but in any capacity, are you thinking about doing fossil or inclusionless for L2s like Arbitrum? Or yeah, and how does that differ from what's in the EIP and what could be on mainnet?
Right, so layer 2 today is most of the layer 2 or all of the layer 2 today, they have just one sequencer, right? So the sequencer definitely have a lot of power. Say today, if you want to force your transactions in there, like if sequencer ignores you, there's nothing you can do. But then there's a lot of people say, well, you can force transaction to layer 1, but that's also not nice because you have to wait like 24 hours, right? But then like, again, I think like decentralized sequencer kind of solves that if you assume an honest majority. So I would say the space in terms of censorship resistance on layer 2 is definitely very different on layer 1. Because on layer 2, you can essentially having like 1 million validators, you could just have like 10 sequencers and then trust like honest majority. And then as long as you assume some of them are honest and they like basically they have to include your transactions.
Any other question? Okay, well, thank you very much for your talk. Please give some applause to Terence.